We're going to try to go through some things. That was really helpful for me to see that example there. And I guess what we're kind of trying to do now, we're going to explain to you an initiative that we've been working on for a number of years, and we've got some resources for you and your communities. But the other piece is, what we want to do is take a look at not only your engagement with the SUD, but also their family and particularly their children. So you want to hit that clicker? That's me, and those of you who know me know that that's my cell phone number, and I don't sleep, so if you want to text me, you're going to get one back at 3 in the morning if you want, so you can try it sometime when you're doing the overnight. And that's Katie, I think, next. And Katie just joined us about 3 months ago on this project that we're working on, and again, she came from NAMI, and she can tell you a little bit about herself and her background in a minute. And we'll go to the next one. So this is the DA's seal, as you know, and the DA is kind enough to pay my salary, and in paying my salary, we write grants for the community. And this one we wrote for was Office for Victims of Crime. We had been looking at the issue of children exposed to violence, either domestic violence or community violence, for about the past 13 years, thereabouts. And this came up, and it was from the Office of Victims of Crime. They were also taking applications for this year as well, but we applied, and it was our title was Community's Response to Addressing Children Exposed to Opioid Epidemic. So we were lucky enough to get this grant. We were awarded in October. It was $541,000. We were pretty happy about that. Of course, with the federal government shutting down, we didn't actually start till March, but we're up and running. Katie's part of that, and Katie's going to introduce some of our other staff in a minute.
Hi everyone. So as Ed said, my name is Katie Mappa. I work at the Family Center, which is a program out of the United Way of Greater Plymouth County. And so with me are Melinda Nealon, the Executive Director, and Jen Cantwell, who's our new advocate for the program. So we are really building on the partnerships that have already been established through Plymouth County Outreach, the DA's office, and now adding the Family Center into that partnership. So what we do, we're an information resource and referral center for families where there are children under the age of 18. We cover the entire Plymouth County area, and so we're looking at this program sort of in 3 areas. We're looking at prevention, getting involved in prevention work for substance use and other issues in our community. Intervention, so doing direct service intervention with children who are identified as being drug endangered, which means that there is substance use happening in their home. Usually their caregiver is the one using. And then policy change, so looking at the ways that we can change policy throughout the county to create a community response to this issue. So my background, I'm a social worker. As Ed said, I came from the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Massachusetts in Boston, where I worked on our criminal justice diversion project. So we were working with police departments and community providers to prevent unnecessary arrest of people with mental illness and substance use issues, mostly focusing on adults. And so I'm really excited to be here and get to be working on reducing trauma and intervening when kids are experiencing trauma due to substance use in their families.
So for a number of years, back in 2002 and 2003, we started to look at data in terms of the number of children exposed to violence. We looked at police reports. Professor Kelly was with us way back in that day, and she looked at Brockton and she looked at Plymouth, and that data was pretty compelling. So for instance, in the city of Brockton, you'll see a slide that we have about 1,400 domestic violence cases. Well, you say, well, that's Brockton. Well, in every town there was these domestic violence cases, certain percentage, and those ratios seem to hold true. We also wanted to look at community violence and the effects it was having on kids in terms of their behavior at school and also long-term behavior in terms of delinquency. On the left, we did a number of studies. We did had the Secret Service come in, the Department of Treasury Secret Service. They have a threat assessment unit. We brought a number of PhDs in. We had 2 major conferences. And again, based on their study in 2002, their findings, Safe School Initiative. And so this is all part of looking at kids who are what we might call at risk, et cetera. And again, right now we've kind of moved from, and we still do the domestic violence, and we still do the community violence, but as we start to talk to communities, one thing that resonates, that gains traction with them, both schools and community people, is they know someone who's affected by the opioid crisis. Next, please. So this is from Professor Kelly, and this looks at the ages of the children who witnessed violence, and I think this was done over 1 year, and I think replicated, but you can see the percentage of kids when officers go to a house and children are present. And again, those of you know, and again, about brain development and early brain development in children, this kind of, and these are, again, the thing that's important to note here, I think, is that these are the children who rose to that level of a police officer going to the house. How many times do events happen in a home and the police never get called, never respond, et cetera, because they don't know? Next, please. And again, Brockton, you'd say, well, that's Brockton. You know, Brockton's got those kind of numbers, so, but, you know, quite frankly, next, please. We looked at Plymouth, and again, you can see the Plymouth overdoses, and you can see the domestic violence calls, almost 700. So again, this is not, and we go to communities, and we've probably trained over 1,000 teachers in Plymouth County at this point. We've been to a number of schools, maybe some in your community, over the last 12 years. But the point is, when we go to schools, we go and we look at, we grab community data. We're going to talk about ACEs in a minute, adverse childhood experiences. We want to take a look at all those kinds of things, because I find that when we go to schools and we lay it out for them, they have no idea what you're dealing with on a daily basis. They have no idea. And then they say, it would be great if we knew that this child, we should know who this child is, because then we can do things differently. We can handle them in a different way. So next, please. So once we had started to understand and work with some police officers, we also partnered up with the Mass Advocates for Children. They wrote this book in 2006. Part of my ask of you today is to ask your schools, do they have a trauma-sensitive approach? Are they working with these? If they want this training, part of this grant we're talking about is we're going to give it to them. We're going to give it to them for free. We'll come in. We'll give them the technical assistance. We'll partner with them the whole way. This has been a proven product for us and for across the country. And again, it's really a way of looking at kids within a school setting. So it's not training one person at the school and saying, oh, that's that trauma person, send all those kids there. No, it's making the entire school what we're going to call trauma sensitive. Next, please. This is something that we had done some training, we had done a presentation, and then we were asked to, in Florida, and then we were asked to do one in West Virginia. And West Virginia came up with this approach. The Purple Book has what they call the red envelope, and it was the idea of that if a police officer could let a teacher know or let the school know, that the school would write it on a piece of paper, put it in a red envelope, something to catch the teacher's attention. The teacher would know if the child's in the back of the room crying or falling asleep or angry or agitated. And we went to West Virginia, and West Virginia has taken this and gone statewide with it. So we like the idea of the Handle with Care kind of moniker. We asked them if we could take it. They said absolutely. Later you'll see that we have a website that we're developing. It's going to be Handle with Care Massachusetts. This has been taken over by Maryland and Michigan, et cetera, and there's a number of other states in the queue. And again, just one thing on that, and that's fine, is just that we're not asking you to tell the school that there was an overdose of the father. All we're asking for is the child's name. If there was a grandparent in the house and they were living there and they were in hospice and they passed and you went there to the house and the child was upset, all we want is the child's name. If a dog died and the child was upset, we want to know those kinds of things that are important for the school to kind of wrap their arms around the kid, almost like a warm handoff for the next day. Next. This is from the International Chiefs of Police. It came out about a year ago. I sent one to every chief in the county, or the DA did. Our office did. It's a training that we would like to bring to your department, whether it's at roll call or it's a PD day. We're working with the Mass Police Council on the Training Council on putting this in for new recruits as well as for PD. But you can see that and some of you may know this, Yale University and Yale Medical School and New Haven Police have been doing ride-alongs now for 25 years. Brockton in 2005 went down to New Haven, checked out this program, and since that time, Brockton's been using it with social workers as well. Lieutenant Linehan is here. He can speak to that better than I, but I think it's been pretty effective, and I think it's worked for the city of Brockton. Next, please. So this is, again, I won't go through all of these, but this is this training that we're asking police officers to go. So for instance, the number of 51As filed up until this point is 31. And to be honest with you, you've got over almost 600 you've been to 600, there's been 600 overdoses. So at some point, I think we need to be looking for children. We want to know who they are because we have some services that Katie's going to talk about. We're working with the community to see if we can't, next please, if we can't identify these kids, if we want to get to them some way, somehow. So we have the school not knowing, sometimes knowing that you told them, but sometimes they don't know. What they see is behavior, and so they respond to that. But in some cases, if we could actually tell them who the child is, we'd be better off. Again, CBJJ's community-based juvenile justice meetings and review of reports. This is what we're asking you all to do. Next, please. The old way was that, the child witnessed the violence, the police would respond. You may or may not file a 51A when appropriate. You'd leave, and I apologize for that other loop up there. But the child would go to school, and there would be no connection. It should not, that last loop shouldn't be up there. There'd be no connection to the school. So the child walks into school, and the child's had this amazing event, crazy event, traumatic event, what have you, life-changing, etc., and they go into school, and no one says a word to them. And so, I don't know about you, but my experience with those kids, I'm thinking about when I was a kid, was I thought all the adults in my world talked to each other. And if I go into school and my mother's been, overdosed or my father got arrested the night before, and again, you're not sharing that information, and no one says anything to me, I have a couple messages in my head, God bless you. One of the things is maybe no one cares, or maybe this is my new normal, or maybe I got to deal with this somehow, some way, somehow. All of those we think are toxic to the child and not helpful in the long run. What we'd rather do is go to it and have you make that connection to the school. Again, Brockton's doing this, Plymouth, maybe you're already doing it in your community, great. We just want to know about it, and if there's technical assistance we can help you with. Maybe you have a school system that's like, yeah, we don't really want to do that. We want to help you kind of break down those barriers. But the idea is that the child gets into some kind of services, or at least is someone's talking to them and being a caring adult. Next. Yeah, so I got this from Ryan Powers. He was a principal of a school in Brockton. He's now the assistant superintendent of Bridgewater Raynham Schools. And he gave me this, and I said, well, okay, this is nice. Student was found rummaging, looking for... I said, why are you giving me this? He said, when I first came in, we had a zero tolerance policy. I said, so what does this mean? He said, well, that's a 3-day suspension, no questions asked. I said, so what do you do now? He said, we ask a lot more questions. Next, please. In the schools in Brockton that we've trained, almost all of them, but we took 3 schools at random, and you can see that there was an 80% decrease in suspendable issues and 43% fewer office referrals. I think that's a plus. Next. I think this is you.
Yep. All right. So now what we're trying to do is take some of what's been learned and what the procedures that are already in place and build on that to respond to the opioid crisis. I'm going to go through the data really fast because you guys know this probably better than I do. You're in it, you're doing it. So this slide, in 2015, the DA's office started looking at all the unattended deaths. So whenever there's an unattended death, it's the DA's office that looks into those and determines the cause of death. And so they pulled the data for all of the opioid overdoses with the question of where are people overdosing? Where is this happening? Assuming that they'd find, parked in a parking lot or in a bathroom of a restaurant. And so what they found was that the vast majority of overdose deaths are happening in the home, and kids live in homes. And so when it's a family, there's a likelihood of kids seeing it. Sometimes they're really the first responder, the first one to walk in and see that happen. So in 2013, there were 42 unattended deaths. In 2015, it was 87. 2014, it was 87. 2015, it went up to 147. So they saw those numbers triple in just 2 years. So that was part of why they did this. And then looking at the age range, and I know that this has changed, we have better data now, this is a little different, but still the highest percentage for overdoses are between the ages of 20 and 39, which are really the parenting years. So we know that children are being affected. This is happening in the home, it's parenting years where this is happening. It's you, Ed.
Yeah, so this is a case some of you may be familiar with, in Marshfield. Of a young victim was 7 months old. And again, the troopers took this picture, and then nothing was staged. But again, this is our idea. What we're trying to do is, how do we work with kids and families who are not only from born with opioid in their system, all the way to grandparents raising grandchildren and everything in between. Next, please. And this one was done by our famous Hillary Dubois and her staff. We were kind of looking at a way to talk to schools and parents and police, et cetera, about thinking about, oh, well, you need to do your presentation to middle school kids and high school kids, because that's really who needs it. But we wanted to draw people's attention to that there's a lot of kids who are affected by what you're dealing with on a daily basis. Next. And I think this is you.
So the basis of this, what we're basing this work, the direct services, the intervention, is on adverse childhood experiences. So this is any experience that happens to a child before the age of 18 that is potentially traumatic, that could have a traumatic impact. So the study was done in 1998 by Kaiser Permanente, just asking everyone through that insurance company about a list of 7 experiences and getting an idea of how many people had experienced that. The numbers were astounding. How many ACEs happen for kids before age 18. You can see the list up here. They've added more since 1998. Those are the additional ACEs. And so the point of this is that the data is really clear. The more ACEs that a child has in their life, the worse their outcomes are. The physical outcomes, they're more likely to have an early death or to have physical health problems, more likely to end up with a mental health condition or a substance use disorder, and they're much more likely to interact with the criminal justice system, either the juvenile system or the adult system. So for us, it's really prevention. If we can start identifying kids who are experiencing adverse childhood experiences and start getting interventions and services in place, the hope is that down the line we'll see fewer of those kids.
Yeah, so again, please. Again, you know this, but again, this is part of that training. Just go, yeah. Again, one of the things we want to reiterate is when you see domestic violence or other things, if there's domestic violence in the home, is it aside? The data tells us, the research tells us, it's 15 times more likely to also be child abuse in the home. So those are the kinds of things we want to start to get officers start to think about, because there are resources that we want to be able to get those children and families hooked up with. Next slide, please. We took a look, this is from the juvenile courts. This is the percentage of ACEs of kids who came in who were interviewed. And again, did they have any of these? And again, you can see the highest one is parental separation. But if you look at also household substance abuse, so these are kids who are before the court, either on a CRA or a delinquency. And again, household substance abuse, 49%. In terms of the care and protections, as you know what care and protection is, but again, that's a termination of parental rights. That in the last 4 years, in almost everywhere in Massachusetts, the number of care and protections has literally doubled. Literally doubled. And of those, 90% or 80% are coming from household substance abuse. Next, please. Again, back to this, our offering this training. We want to get it to you. All you got to do is ask. We'll be there. We'll do roll calls. We'll do PD days, what have you. Next.
So part of the toolkit that was just up there is an organizational self-assessment tool. It's just to look at what departments are already doing. So I'm going to be turning this into a survey, and I just have a couple of examples of different things. My hope is that each department will fill this out. It'll be anonymous. You won't have to say which department you are. We just want to get a baseline of what our county is already doing really well and maybe some of the gaps that we can address through training. So please respond to that.
And lastly, this is our, you'll see some of the literature. There might be some in the back. If you need some for your community groups, let's say you got to go speak at a Rotary and you want some material, you want data, you want handouts, we'll give it to you. Tell us, we'll hand deliver it, we'll get it to you. This is the kind of thing we need to be producing and get it to your hands, because you're the boots on the ground for us. Okay.
All right, and me again. So for the direct service pieces, so at my position, I'm the clinical advocate. So when families are referred to me, really what I'll be doing is wraparound care coordination. So families that are experiencing overdose within their family, it's a really intense time for them, and it can be really difficult to navigate complex systems. So my role is to do assessments on the children and the families to determine the highest needs and then to connect them to resources, to follow up with them to make sure that they're taking advantage of those resources and that it's working for them. So that's my role and what I'll be doing. The referral process, we're still working through a little bit the kinks of that, but at this point, I'm working with the PCO staff to train the outreach teams on how to talk about the Drug Endangered Children program and then how to make a referral to the Family Center for that. It'll be happening mostly during follow-up visits, so it's not extra work while officers are on scene for the initial call, and likely it'll be the recovery coaches that will be doing more of the legwork of actually talking about it and making the referrals. So when you fill out the database and your reports, and you're noting that there are children there are 3 boxes: that a child was present at the scene, a child is affiliated with the home, and a 51A is filed. If you check any of those 3 boxes, that will indicate to the outreach team that there's a need for them to talk about this program. So those 3 boxes are now really important for us to identify the kids and be able to actually get those referrals to come into the family center.
Yeah, one other place that I think that we can engage, and we're almost done here, but is the idea of those kids. I just mentioned the care and protections in the court. So we see those kids who are before the juvenile court on care and protections, CRAs, even delinquencies. No surprise, as I showed you the data before, that's places where we can engage those kids as well. So for lack of a better expression, kind of low-lying fruit. The other place in the court system that we can hopefully work with people and identify is going before the drug court and seeing if there are people who are involved in the drug court who have children who wish to get some services or get some help, etc. This is a website that's soon to be launched, hopefully before the end of the month. It's Handle with Care Massachusetts. If you want to see the original, it's Handle with Care West Virginia, but ours will be almost similar to it. We'll be putting up PCO announcements, videos, trainings, webinars, all kinds of things on here. If you have something you want posted, we're happy to do that for you. Again, it's a great training tool for you to refer your schools to or your community agencies, and we hope to get it up and running in the next several weeks, as I said. And that's it for us, unless you have questions. But aside from that, I got to get a picture of Miss Hillary Dubois, who's sitting here, and I got to get a picture of you because you look great, and she's in a very comfortable position. Is there any questions?
And just a quick note, Katie
Sure.
just alluded to it. In the SIMS database with the KRA created, we have those 3 fields. That's one of the areas that we're looking to improve on the data collection piece. So, we've put out some training materials. We'll be following up on that as well, because at some point, we're going to be able to push that information directly to Katie and your team.
Great. I'm around. Again, you want to grab me, and again, anytime you need us to come and do a training for your KFC or your Rotary or even your own department, your school, we're happy to be there. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your effort.